Excellencies, scholar, statesman, former Foreign Minister George Yeo, Indian Water Resources Minister Salman Khurshid, Ambassador, Director Kesavapani, High Commissioner Raghavan, distinguished guests. At the outset, let me say how deeply honored I feel that President Nathan, who saw Netaji here in 1943, has graced this occasion, which is wrapped in rich historical symbolism. I'm also very happy to see so many friends gathered here today, and I would like to pay a special tribute to the 3 veterans of the Indian National Army who are present amongst us on this auspicious day. I'm deeply grateful to the High Commission of India and ISEAS for organizing this event. When the sun rose on July 5th, 1943, over Singapore Harbour, it was the proudest day in Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose's life. He appeared looking resplendent in a simple khaki military uniform on the balcony of Singapore's green-domed municipal building, flanked by its majestic Corinthian columns. The soldiers of the Indian National Army stood in serried ranks in front of him on the Padang, the expanse of green that stretched from the steps of the city hall towards the sea. George Washington of America could fight and win freedom, he told the vanguard of India's struggle, because he had his army. Garibaldi could liberate Italy because he had his armed volunteers behind him. History had taught him the lesson of the inexorable decline and fall of empires. He and the pioneers of the Indian National Army were standing on what had been once a bulwark, now reduced to a graveyard of the mighty British Empire. How many of us will individually survive this war of freedom, he said in a somber warning, I do not know. But I do know this, that we shall ultimately win, and our task will not end until our surviving heroes hold the victory parade on another graveyard of the British Empire, the Lal Killa, or the Red Fortress of ancient Delhi. The victory parade at the Red Fort aimed to be enacted in a most unusual way. When the Second World War ended, the Indian independence movement seemed in disarray. The Quit India movement launched by Mahatma Gandhi in August 1942 had been crushed. Netaji's armed thrust from outside India's borders had been repulsed. At such a moment of despondency in nationalist ranks, Netaji's soldiers arrived in the Red Fort of Delhi in their thousands as prisoners. The triumphant British decided to teach a demoralized nation a lesson by putting on public trial 3 officers of the INA. Bose himself could not have made a better choice of the Red Fort 3. The British charged a Hindu, a Muslim and a Sikh, Prem Kumar Sehgal, Shahnawaz Khan and Gurbaksh Singh Dhillon with high treason for waging war against the King Emperor. The whole country has been roused, Mahatma Gandhi observed, and even the regular forces have been stirred into a new political consciousness and have begun to think in terms of independence. The man whom Netaji had been the first to hail as the father of our nation now regarded his rebellious son as a prince among patriots. Netaji's name, Gandhi wrote, is one to conjure with. His patriotism is second to none. The lesson that Netaji and his army brings to us, the Mahatma wrote in Harijan on February 12, 1946, is one of self-sacrifice, unity, irrespective of class and community, and discipline. As the drama unfolded in the winter of 1945 and the spring of 1946, Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose commanded in absentia the denouement of the plot. Indians have never had any difficulty in combining reverence for saints with admiration for warrior heroes. The great Indian epics, especially the Mahabharata, had placed warriors in a just cause on the highest pedestal. The sword of the warrior, and early 20th century nationalists had asserted, is as necessary to the fulfillment of justice and righteousness as the holiness of the saint. The conquering hero, whose name was on everyone's lips, did not make an appearance on the stage at its climax. As he became shrouded in myth and mystery, a great deal was lost in terms of a genuine understanding of who he was as a human being and of his place in history. Yet the life was in important ways greater and certainly as fascinating as the legend. And if there is one reason why I wrote this book, it is this. I felt that the life was more important than the legend and needed to be brought once more before the younger generation. Bose's political career, traversing complex international itineraries, required a constant negotiation of global forces. His life encapsulated all of the dramatic contradictions of world history in the first half of the 20th century. 7 days before being assassinated on January 30th, 1948, Gandhi had been very glad to take note of Subhash's birthday. Subhash, according to the Mahatma, knew no provincialism nor communal differences, and had in his brave army men and women drawn from all over India without distinction, and evoked affection and loyalty which very few have been able to evoke. It is on January 23rd in the year 1897 that Subhash was born at the high noon of the Raj. He would devote his life towards ensuring that the sun did finally set on the British Empire. He was much more than a warrior hero, and I have in this book also tried to present the Subhash Bose with a philosophical bent of mind, somebody who thought about the future, who had plans about the social and economic reconstruction of India after freedom was won, who had a vision of Asian universalism that would bind together the various peoples of Asia. It was on the night of January 16, 17, 1941 that Netaji escaped from his home in Elgin Road, and it was his nephew Shishir, my father, then just a medical student, who drove the car in which he escaped. He dropped his uncle at Gomo railway junction in the neighboring province of Bihar, and from there Subhash Chandra Bose travelled by train to Delhi and Peshawar, and then hitchhiked his way to Kabul. And from Kabul, having acquired the passport of an Italian diplomat, Orlando Mazzotta, went via Soviet Central Asia, Moscow to Berlin. Bose had plunged into the freedom movement led by Gandhi in 1921 after resigning from the ISEAS, the Indian Civil Service. Yet in the subsequent 2 decades of mass agitations against colonial rule, the soldiers of Britain's Indian Army had remained insulated from the swirling currents of civilian political discontent. Bose had made up his mind that at the climactic moment of India's anti-imperialist struggle, the loyalty of Indian men-in-arms to the British King Emperor had to be replaced by a new allegiance to the cause of Indian independence. He then, of course, travelled all the way from Europe to Asia by submarine. He had only one Indian companion on that voyage, Abid Hassan, from whom I heard the story of that journey myself and recorded it while he was still alive. And Abid Hassan once told me that he had asked Netaji while they were standing on the deck of the submarine when it had surfaced, what is the worst fate that you can imagine you could suffer? And apparently without a moment's hesitation, Netaji had replied, to be in exile. Now, most of his life was spent either in prison or exile, but there was this deep yearning to return home. So that was what he had said to Abid Hassan. And it's quite fascinating that when he was embarking on his submarine voyage, he had written to the German foreign minister, there is a certain amount of risk undoubtedly in this undertaking. But so is there in every undertaking. That risk I shall gladly and voluntarily take. At the same time, I believe in my destiny, and I therefore believe that this endeavor will succeed. After a 90-day journey that included a transfer in a rubber raft from one submarine to another in the middle of the Indian Ocean, he arrived in Sabang on the island of Sumatra. From there he flew to Tokyo and back to Singapore, where he took over the leadership of the Indian Independence League on the 4th of July, 1943, and of the Indian National Army on this day, July 5th, 1943. In the months that followed, he electrified massive audiences of civilians and soldiers with his speeches. On October 21, 1943, he proclaimed the formation of a provisional government of Azad Hind, Free India in Singapore. He wrote the proclamation himself well past midnight on October 19, 20th, 1943, drawing on Indian history and elements of the Irish and American declarations of independence. And as a child growing up, I heard from S.A. Iyer himself how he wrote this proclamation at one go, without once looking up from the paper on which he was writing throughout the night. With Chalo Delhi on their lips, the INA crossed the Indo-Burma frontier and carried the armed struggle onto Indian soil. The promised march to Delhi was, however, halted in Impala. It was Bose's historic retreat with the soldiers of the INA and the women of the Rani of Jhansi regiment from Burma to Thailand, a dangerous trek under constant enemy fire in April and May 1945, that left an indelible imprint on popular memory about the sacrifices made by these warriors to pay the price of freedom. The last day that Netaji spent in Singapore was August 15th, 1945. On the 16th August morning, he flew to Bangkok. So this is just exactly 2 years before India's independence. And he was sitting on the veranda of his Maya Road residence, and there was a cabinet meeting going on of the Provisional Government of Free India. And one of his officers, Cyril John Strachey, an Anglo-Indian officer, came with half a dozen designs, rolls of paper, for the INA memorial, for which he had laid a foundation stone on the 8th of July. And Subhash Chandra Bose asked Strachey, can you build this memorial before the British landing in Singapore? And Strachey said yes, and with a smart Jai Hind and a handshake, he went away and built in record time the memorial, which had the motto of the INA, Etman, faith, Ittifaq, unity, and Qurban, sacrifice, enshrined on it. And it was on that day that Netaji issued his last order of the day from Singapore, and a special message to Indians in East Asia. The roads to Delhi are many, he told his soldiers, and Delhi still remains our goal. And urging his civilian followers never to falter in their faith in India's destiny, he expressed confidence that India shall be free, and before long. In this mortal world, everything perishes and will perish, Subhash Chandra Bose had written in 1940 while in prison. But ideas, ideals and dreams do not. As he prepared for a fast unto death to try and force the British to release him, he expressed confidence that the idea for which one individual was prepared to die would incarnate itself in 1,000 lives. That, he believed, was how the wheels of evolution turned, and the ideas, ideals and dreams of one generation were bequeathed to the next. No idea has ever fulfilled itself in this world, he asserted, except through an ordeal of suffering and sacrifice. It is in his immense sacrifice, in the sense of Tyag, as taught by the sages Ramakrishna and Vivekananda, and Qurbani, as emblazoned on the INA memorial that came up on the sea face in Singapore, that has made him the heir to a life immortal. And I hope that since Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose's life is so intertwined with the history of Singapore, we will be able, first of all, to follow his example of harmony among all religious and ethnic communities, whether Indians, Chinese, Malay, between all religious communities, Hindus, Muslims, Sikhs, Christians, Buddhists, others, and hopefully that his historic example will strengthen